Hello, everybody, and welcome to this stream. We are going to talk a little bit more about testing today. This is the Q&A session for people that have bought our testing course. And people that bought our testing course, they could send us questions, but we've decided to open up the session for everybody to get a little bit more of interactivity. Now, if you have arrived here without knowing what the testing course is. The testing course is testinglaravel.com. It's a premium video course where we explain how to test your Laravel application. Now, I'm not going to do this Q&A session by myself. I got my colleague Brent here with me. Hi, Brent.
Okay. Hi, hey Freek. Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. Looking forward to another live stream.
Yeah, indeed. It has been a while since we've done one together, right? I think a little over a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. It's high time to spend some time together again.
Yeah, indeed. With us two and the audience, right? If there are
Absolutely.
any questions, yeah, just put them in the chat. Brent and I will keep a look at them. So what we are going to do is, yeah, we got some questions from various people about testing. We are going to try to answer them as good as we can. And then we are going to show you some cool coding snippets from our own stuff. And yeah, if we have some time left, we'll also answer all the questions in the chat. So maybe let's start with the questions we got. Let's see. Do I have this document open? Is there a question where you want to start with, Brent?
Nah, let's just start at the top. That's fine.
Okay. Let me read the question. So this is a question that came in. I don't know if you should say the name. I'm not going to say the name, maybe privacy concerns or something. But there's somebody that asks, what role do static analysis tools have in the world of testing? Are they for specific sections in the code base? Where do we use static analysis and where do you use tests? Now, Brent, I think this is like a perfect question for you, since you've already started your newsletter on static analysis. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand together. And there are indeed some places in our code where you could say that static analysis is enough. And I'm thinking of our data transfer object package now, where the goal is that you create very strictly typed objects in PHP and with the help of some added functionality by the package, so that you can be sure that there aren't any edge cases that can happen at runtime. So based on the very strict type definitions, you can assume that those objects, they will just work solely based on static analysis, which I think is really one of the powers of static analysis. But it also has its limits, because static analysis mainly uses type information. And we're, of course, doing quite a little bit more than just writing strictly typed code. There are some, oftentimes, business logic related to complex processes and stuff like that. And yeah, of course, those are the places where unit tests and integration tests really add value. So I think that by being able to use PHP's type system in the places where I don't know if I can say it like this, but it's a little bit boring code, like data transfer objects. They don't do much. But if you can just rely on PHP's type system and static analysis in those cases, you can focus on the cooler stuff, the more complex stuff in other places. Imagine, for example, if you would model all the data in your application as arrays without any type information. You would constantly have to think about, okay, doing null checks and doing type checks in your code and having to write tests for those. And all of that just goes away thanks to static analysis. So it's really both worlds coming together.
Yeah.
And they complement each other very much.
Yeah, I think we have like the same opinion about this. I think like tests are, or I'll start differently. The tests that the type of tests that I write the most are feature tests,
Hmm.
where where I test, yeah, specific features in context of the entire application. And yeah, this is something that static analysis can't help you with,
Hmm.
because it's about like the logic, like the business logic and how things are working together. And static analysis is, I think, more fine grained than that. Yeah, sure, static analysis can catch some bugs, but these are often, yeah, what you also called, I think, like the boring bugs, like
Yeah.
a type that goes wrong or a deep technical thing that goes wrong. And it's good that you have that, so it allows you to. Um, or it affords you not to have to write tests for those cases.
Yeah.
I think if you were a very strict type or test writer, then you would probably have to write a lot of tests to make sure that, yeah, if I give this function an int instead of a string, does it work then?
Mm.
And you don't want to write those boring tests, I think. Now,
Yeah.
I feel that in PHP, um, that's the distinction that I make. But in JavaScript, it's a little bit different, I think. With TypeScript, I think TypeScript is so good that sometimes you can afford not to write tests at all, because TypeScript will just, if you type everything,
Mm.
it can save you. But I feel like
Yeah.
PHP static analysis tools are not as far as TypeScript's yet.
Yeah, definitely. I remember our colleague Seb. He posted on our Slack maybe 2 years ago. He was experimenting with TypeScript, and he posted. He said, "Guys, I just spent the whole day programming TypeScript. I never ran my code. I haven't written any tests, and at the end of the day, I just run it, and it worked
Yeah.
just fine." So yeah, um, uh, static analysis and type systems can be very powerful, much more powerful than what we have in PHP today. Um, but the reality is that no single type system will be able to cover every single edge case that your business requires. So tests will always be some part of our programming flow, especially in PHP, since while we have very good static analysis tools today, there's still much room for improvement, I would say. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, you know what? Before we dive into our Google Docs again, let's do some questions from the audience, because there are
Huh?
some interesting questions here. And here's a good general one by Mattia. I probably butchered the name a little bit. How deep should we go with testing? So I think, how far should you go? Should you test everything? How do you know when
Mm.
you've tested enough? This is a pretty interesting question. Um,
Yeah, and I think we have some very cool examples at the end of the questions here as well. Um, but it's always a balancing game between integration tests, like those very high level tests, and unit tests, where you go really where you focus in on one detail of your code, and both again have to be combined in some way in order to fully appreciate all the benefits that testing can bring. Um, I do feel lately, and I don't know about you, Frick, but I do feel lately to to want to write more integration tests, very high level tests, where maybe a year or two ago I was very much focused on trying to unit test as small as possible things.
yeah.
And I've just come to a point where, especially in Laravel applications, where we're actually building uh, web applications for clients to use, I'm like, okay, let's just act like we're a visitor on a web page, or a user in an admin panel or something, and let's just test from that point of view, because that's the point of view where that users will actually um, that's how they will use the application. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so too. I think like feature tests, integration tests, for me it's the same actually. Um, yeah, they give you the most benefits. And to answer the question, like how deep should you go with testing, I think you
Mm.
should go. I think testing should give you confidence that everything is working. And this is a little bit of a vague metric, but I think you should write tests enough until you're fairly certain, like, if I'm going to change these things, I'm not going to break some stuff anymore.
Mhm.
And I think with a couple of good feature tests, you won't need unit tests anymore, or not for everything. I also
Yeah.
think it differs a little bit from project to project.
Yeah.
If you have some very businessy kind of logic that really never should fail, maybe you write some more unit tests to make sure that that particular piece of logic without the application code, that is just working.
Mhm.
So it yeah, like most things in programming, it depends a little bit. But I think if you would summarize it all, you should test enough until you got enough confidence that if you start changing things, you're not going to introduce subtle bugs or break things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Hmm.
And I mean, I've definitely had many cases where I wanted to unit test just because they are in general faster tests, easier to set up because you're focusing on one particular class or a function. But um, I find that those are more like the edge cases for the projects that we do.
Hmm.
But when there is a case for unit tests, it often ends up with a large test class or even several test classes with lots of little variations of the same test just to make sure that everything works. Every edge case is covered. So yeah.
Hey Brent, you said that you had like a good example of this. Maybe we can do it already now since that we're talking about it.
Yeah, I was thinking about sorry, the code that we were discussing before this stream started, Freek. Just these very high level tests that cover quite a lot, and I actually think it was your example. So
Okay, I'll do my example. Yeah, I was thinking about my example as well, but
yeah, okay,
you know what? I'm a modest, friendly guy, so I would have given you the spot. But let's
go ahead.
do a little bit of window management here because I had everything on my primary window. Let's share my screen and add the little thing. Yeah, I had here the test of this package. You mean, right, Brent? The support
Mm,
bubble one.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So maybe for people that don't know this package, let me quickly introduce it. I hope my browser will open on the other window. So this is a package that can add a little helping or support bubble to every page, and yeah, I can actually show it to you live. It's on Flare app. Oh no, here on Flare app it's only when it's logged in. So I'm going to show it on Odir. There it's always there. So it adds this little thing, and you can fill out this form to get a little bit of support. Now you see that we ask email here, but if you are logged in, then it won't ask the email because we just get the email from the logged in user. And you can ask, yeah, how can we test that? And actually, it is pretty simple to do something like that. So this is the test suite of the package. I used Pest here. I prefer Pest nowadays when I do something, when I create something new. And you can see here that we have a test that makes sure that it can be rendered, and that support bubble, it is implemented as a blade component. So we use the blade helper, and we just assert that we see a certain class that gets displayed by this component. Just by testing if this is there, we know, hey, this rendered correctly. Now, what I want to show you is how can we test that if there is somebody logged in, that we can that it actually works, that we use the username and the email from such a user. And it's laughably simple. We just have to log in somebody, and this is a helper function that I created. We're just going to create a new user with some dummy data. And then we're just going to assert that we see that data on the page. And for me, this test gives enough confidence that that piece of the functionality is working. Mm. If you take a look at the tests that are written for this package, you can see that there only are like a couple of things here. But what we're not going to do is, create any more granular tests for this. We're just going to see if is this on the page, and I don't mind how the code here gets this on the page. This should be the end result. There are a couple of other blade files here as well, but we're not going to write tests for these all, and also not for every kind of file that is here. We're just going to use this package in our test as if a normal user would, and we're just going to see the effect there. Oh, and I made a little typo here. Let's fix that. Render it. Yeah, yes. That was what I was going to show.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think most of our packages have tests like these nowadays, where they are not too much unit tests, but a lot of feature tests. All right, I think that covers that question. I think enough. Let's see if there's something
there are quite
else.
A lot more.
Yeah, indeed. I don't know if Steve is heckling us or not with this question. What is a test? For people that don't know, it's just a little script that just executes some of your code. Oh, this is a better question. Who is this king, and can we ban him?
Well, I think Christoph actually had a good question a little earlier.
This one, right?
Yeah.
So what are the cases in your project where backend tests are not enough anymore and you need to add dedicated front-end tests? What are your thoughts on that, Brent?
Yeah, well, now that we're moving more and more towards like inertia and Livewire and stuff like that, I noticed that there is quite a lot of need for front-end focus tests. But like if you use Livewire, you still write PHP unit tests. I mean, PHP tests in general, because Livewire has this pretty good testing layer on top of it. If you're using inertia, you'll have to look at real JavaScript tests.
Though maybe if server-side rendering lands, right. it could become easier as well, that you could do it without a real browser starting up.
Yeah, well, but I assume that if you're using something like Inertia or Livewire, you are using it because you want rich front-end experience in the browser. So I feel like it's probably more complicated than just only testing server-side rendered stuff. But maybe that's because I'm not all too familiar with the server-side Inertia stuff. But it's definitely something that we're experiencing more and more. How oftentimes a simple controller test isn't enough anymore. And we've done all kinds of things in our projects. We've used Dusk, which are really slow tests and rather brittle tests. But if they work, they cover
a lot.
Very much. Yeah. We've written quite a lot of JavaScript tests in Jest, I believe. That's not my area of expertise. So what I try to focus on, if I'm like the real backend programmer, I don't really enjoy the front end stuff. So what I try to focus on, if we start working on a new feature, is decoupling front end and back end maybe a little more than we used to do, and just focus on creating the business logic and exposing that logic via controllers or maybe the CLI or stuff like that. And those are like the edge the edge infrastructure around my business code. And the business code is very easy to unit test or integration test, depending on what your definition of unit tests are. Um, and so backend and front end become a little more decoupled from each other, and it's the edges where controllers and commands live, that you might need to do some more JavaScript tests, or that you want to write artisan tests in Laravel also work flawlessly. So yeah, but by splitting, by having this code split in backend and frontend, makes it easier to not having to combine everything together when it comes to testing.
Yeah, I think it depends also a little bit on the kind of project that you do. If I think about like a concrete project that we did with lots of front end, then I think at Flare, we all already mentioned it a little bit. The Flare code base is a Laravel application with a React front end on top. Most of the tests in that project are for the backend, because most of the rules and the real work happens there. And for the front end in React, we don't have a lot of tests. It's just TypeScripted. And then there are a couple of tests, but these are the dusk tests that where we see like the two are really working together. We're logging in via Flare, via dusk test, and seeing are the errors being displayed there. And that for that particular project gives enough confidence, because there isn't any real logic that is being performed in the front end. Now, I think if you want to test things on the front end, you could take a look at Cypress as well. I haven't used it much, but I hear a lot of people saying very good things about Cypress for that kind of testing. So yeah, it's always a little bit of a balancing act, like you said.
Yeah.
Brent.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take another question from our Google Doc.
Yeah, sure.
Just to see if we have that covered. We have here one. I have a large project using PHP Unit that uses the PHP Unit snapshot assertions. And then I converted my test suite to Pest PHP for half of it, and then I added Pest plugin snapshot. And those two snapshot packages, so the Pest and the PHP unit one, they try to save snapshots in different directories.
Yeah.
Well, my answer for this is, excuse me. Yes, we're aware that these packages save them in a different directory. And our recommendation would be to just convert all of your snapshot tests at once, so that you don't start using those two packages together. I think that would be the most easy way.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of my water here. Okay, do you want to pick a question, Brent?
Yeah, maybe two together. I see in the comments here someone asking about restoring database state with transaction rollbacks, and what to do if your test database doesn't support nested transaction. And we also had a question about if you're using JSON columns that aren't supported by SQLite, how do we handle that? Because
that's
default,
an interesting one.
Yeah, the default database for Laravel tests is SQLite, which has a slightly different feature set compared to MySQL. And how do you handle that? And the question is actually very simple, and it worked for us, but you I'm not sure if it works for everyone, but we just use MySQL databases for our tests exactly because of these reasons. Because you're always dealing with those very little changes, differences between the different grammars, and it's just not worth worrying about it, in my experience.
Yeah, I think that in some years ago we tried to use SQLite for everything. I still remember like this is a cool thing that you can do in SQLite. You can add functions to it
Mm,
dynamically, and we tried adding like the MySQL functions that we needed to use to SQLite. But this is really a bad idea to do because
mm,
yeah, like you said, there are always subtle differences. So I would always just use the database that you use in production also in your test. So that is just
yeah.
the same thing and that you don't have to think about it. And you know, the few seconds that it is slower, or potentially slower, because I'm not saying that it is always slower, it's
Mm,
totally worth it. You know, if you have one extra problem because you're using different databases, yeah, it's gonna take you more than just a few seconds to find it out. So yeah, just use the
yeah.
database that you're using in production in your test as well.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Um, mm, mm. This is also an interesting one from our Google Doc, I think, about mocking.
Hmm.
Should a class used in a mock wait, because this is not formulated in the correct sentence. I think the question is about final classes and
Mm.
mocks. How do we marry these two concepts together?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, you don't. Next
Fre-
question. No.
yes, Freek and I have very different opinions on the use of final. Um, is it okay if I go first,
Yeah,
Freek?
sure, sure. Go ahead.
Um, if you're using final classes and you find the need to mock them, I would say that you're using final classes in the wrong way. Uh, if you're using final classes, you should really be focused on um, composing different functionality together and really program to an interface instead of using concrete classes. So if you decide to use final and don't decide to fully embrace composition over inheritance, and that's a whole other topic, maybe a book in itself, but it will yeah, kick you in the ass basically. I'm sorry, but so if you properly use composition and a program to interfaces throughout your whole application, you won't have the need to use mocking libraries. And that's that would be my preferred approach, because I can see quite a lot of value in programming that way. But some people don't agree with me, right, Freek? So at Spatie we decided to not use final, so we don't have to deal with those kinds of problems, which is good, because if we would use final and keep programming the same way we're doing now, we would run exactly in those kinds of problems, and we don't want to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Final is overrated. I think we tried Final before we ditched it. I think for a couple of months. Then we said there isn't enough value first there, so we don't use Final, so we don't run into these kind of problems. And I think Nuno has a good remark here. You could use internal or Final annotations, so yeah, for your static analysis and in a good IDE, you would get warnings when you try to extend of these things, but you can still use these classes in
Yeah.
mock. So I think that is like a good middle ground.
Yeah. The problem, of course, with using annotations is that it's not enforced by PHP.
Yeah,
So the the
but
people
is
who want
that
to extend it,
a
sorry,
problem that it isn't enforced? I don't
yeah,
think it's really a problem.
uh, we really should do some kind of live stream, the big final debate with 10 or 15 programmers all debating it together.
Yeah.
So.
and then the audience gets a button, and you can vote people away and see how a lot of people can stay, like the pit of PHP, so something like
Yes.
that. Maybe we should do that. That's maybe a fun concept.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, there's
That was the hot topic for today.
yeah. I'm glad we're still both in this stream, Brent. I see a couple of nice comments here that I'm going to quickly show. Irun says, I keep on using SQLite until I come across something that doesn't work in SQLite. I think that's a valid strategy as well.
Yeah. But just
yeah.
if one addition, I wouldn't fight it if you come across the issues. So as soon